The views and opinions of this program are those of the host, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Today's episode of Market Talk is brought to you by Growmark FS. Keeping up with the latest in ag is a challenge, to say the least, but there are experts nearby ready to help. You'll find them at your local FS. You can trust them to bring you customized agronomic, grain, and energy solutions born of the latest thinking. That's because FS specialists receive continuous training that keeps them current on the latest trends, practices, and technologies. So you'll get local expertise that's both exceptional and up to date. Visit fssystem.com to learn how FS is bringing you what's next. And joining us now here on the program, always great to catch up with him for a monthly conversation. He is the Business Growth Director for Agriculture at Osborne Bar Paramore. Former FSA Administrator Richard Fordyce is with us here once again on the program. Richard, always great to talk to you, my friend. How are things going in Missouri?
Well, Jesse, as usual, I always look forward to our visits and a chance to get caught up. Well, it's hot in Missouri. We leading up to this week, we were seeing some forecasted highs, in the low 100s. That hasn't materialized, but it's trying. It's trying to get there. It's trying to get to 100. It's been, mid to upper 90s here. Right here at our place in Northwest Missouri, we haven't had some of the winds that they've been predicting, which everybody listening knows that hot weather and wind is not a good combination. But things look right around here. Things look pretty good. And I think we talked about this at one visit before. Just with the traits and the technology and the advancements in our corn varieties and soybean varieties, they're tougher than they used to be. And the crop is holding on. Our thoughts, I think, of having some sort of a record, I think those have gone by the wayside. But I do think that, boy, if we could just, it seems like we always say this in July and August, boy, if we could just get a timely rain, it would really help. But, we can't keep saying that because, there's just going to be, I think there's going to be some, some certainly top end is gone out of this crop. And I think we're hanging on and waiting to see what the next couple of weeks bring. I think that's going to be really a critical time for us, temperature related and precipitation related. A rain would really help
Yeah.
right now.
Well, and I think I saw the stat, Missouri facing 81% moderate drought or worse right now. I mean, you think about that, that's a pretty big chunk of the state there that's experiencing that drought. And really, you look across the Corn Belt, you look at the recent drought monitor, and there's just a lot of orange, a lot of red, a lot of brown in spots. And that's never good when you see those colors showing up in a wide area of the Corn Belt on the drought monitor. So I think, to your point, maybe losing a little bit of top end off this crop. I think that is that's definitely in the cards at this point, Richard.
It is, and I think too, if we think back, we've really been, in a lot of those areas that you're talking about that are orange and brown and yellow on the U.S. Drought Monitor have been dry for a year. We went into this planting season with no excess moisture. Our subsoil moistures were marginal at best. And so I call them maintenance rains. We've been getting maintenance rains occasionally, which I think has helped this crop, at least stay alive. And, but we think back to about Missouri State Fair time, which is, that first couple of weeks of August. And we've been dry since then.
Yeah. Richard, I should ask you too, since we're on this topic of drought, I know you're a cattle guy. There's some talk out there of ranchers maybe looking to start rebuilding the herd as drought eases in some areas. I think, mainly we're talking Southern Plains, Texas, Oklahoma, whereas, Missouri, Kansas, et cetera, is facing that severe drought here as well. And we just got recent cattle numbers. I mean, we got the lowest beef cow herd in quite some time. What's your take on rebuilding this cattle herd? I mean, what's your thoughts? What are you hearing from other ranchers right now?
Well, I think that's like twofold. One, I've talked to folks like around Amarillo, Texas, people in eastern Wyoming, kind of down through Colorado, and they've told me it's as green as they've ever seen it. Like they have more forage than in some cases than they've ever seen in their lifetime because of some rain, some timely rains and some cooperative weather. And I think, some of those folks that I talk to are thinking, let's rebuild the herd. We've got forage. Let's try to put something out there to take advantage of that. And then on the flip side, you did mention Missouri, Kansas, and other places more in the Midwest that are experiencing drought. I talked to a friend of mine who runs a pretty significant cow-calf operation, and his hay yield was a third what it usually averages. He was able to find some hay in the boot heel of Missouri. They'd mowed levees and had put that up for hay, and he's hauling 1,000 bales. I can't remember what he said, but it's 300 or 400 miles one way, and they've been able to source that hay and get it up there. They are not liquidating their herd or any of it, but I do know people in not far from here that have been selling cows just because of short forage, short hay crop. We did, and I know a lot of folks. I've seen a lot of mowers and balers rolling in CRP, and so a lot of CRP hay is being put up, in this area, and I know in a pretty good size area around us. So, yeah, it's interesting how things can change in one part of the country that really affects another part of the country. And so maybe some of these cattle that are being liquidated out of Missouri, Kansas area, find their way to the Texas Panhandle, Colorado, Wyoming. Yeah. I think, and you're right, that cattle number is historically low.
Yeah, very, very true. Well, and as you mentioned, there's some legislation helping out with emergency CRP haying. So definitely a situation to watch here in rural America. Richard, let's thinking about legislation. I want to segue, talk about DC, talk some policy with you. And one story that's really been gaining some traction here the last couple of weeks is folks looking to kind of rally against checkoffs. It's a big hot topic. We've seen legislation introduced, an amendment by Representative Victoria Spartz, a Indiana Republican, would prohibit USDA from using any tax dollars to administer commodity checkoff programs. And there's been others who have been attacking checkoffs. So what's the latest you're hearing on all of this, and what's the issue here? Are folks wanting more transparency? What are you hearing with this situation, Richard?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let me say that, just from my opinion, some of this conversation around checkoffs and limiting the administration of those through USDA and some of those other provisions that have been introduced is a little concerning to me. And the reason I say that is, we've had in my mind, and I'm not familiar with all of them, and there are, what are there, 30 some commodity checkoffs?
I was to say, I think the number is 22 that USDA oversees. Okay. If that's the number I have in front of me, everything from
that's probably right.
Beef, eggs, everything to Christmas trees, even.
Oh, so, yeah, absolutely. Yep. And if they're a federal checkoff, they came about through congressional action. And we also have a lot of one-off, like state checkoffs for specific things. And those were brought about, again, by congressional action with support of the producers that grow that crop or raise that livestock. And I think that you can track success in all of those, right? Like the ability for producers to be able to pool their money and do research and education and promotion of that commodity is really, really critical, because if the producer of that commodity and that organization that supports that, if they're not doing that, then who's going to do it, right? Like, we certainly have industry partners that help, but at the end of the day, the beef checkoff, the soybean checkoff, those checkoffs are really important when it comes to promoting and doing some things that are important for that commodity. Some of the naysayers are saying that, yes, they want more transparency. Some claims, which I don't know where they come from, but some claims, the checkoffs are prohibited from doing any lobbying work, right? So they can't lobby Congress, but they can do education. And there's a lot of opportunities for the checkoffs to engage. I know some of them have done, research studies on the importance of infrastructure, on, domestic trade, international trade, figuring out the numbers and do demand building in countries and, find markets. And these kinds of things are what the checkoffs really kind of hang their hat on. Checkoffs do not lobby. And so to hear some of this, some of this disgruntled conversation around checkoffs doing lobbying work, I just don't know where that comes from. And I think, when this is investigated a little further, or there's more research done on what's happening with checkoffs, I think they are transparent. I think that, every checkoff, obviously posts their annual reports. Mm-hmm. There are opportunities, and the checkoffs are mandated that they do producer communication. And so there's a component of that checkoff, no matter which one it is, that's communicating to producers about what that checkoff is doing, and what it's doing on their behalf. A lot of them have ROI studies. So if you put $1 into the checkoff, the work that the checkoff has done, what did that return you? What was your return on investment? And I think that, they all have a good story to tell. And I think when we get to an opportunity to talk about this, whether that's through, a hearing process or whatnot, I think a lot of the good work of the checkoffs is going to come out and come forward. I don't know, Jesse, where some of this is coming from. Mm-hmm. I think depending on the commodity checkoff, it could be folks that don't agree with the direction that the leadership, which by the way are farmers that are appointed by the secretary to represent those, maybe some folks aren't completely aligned with the direction or the priorities that the checkoff are doing. And in that situation, I say get involved. Like if you are a producer of that commodity and you'd like to see that whatever checkoff focus on another area or spend less time on a certain area, get involved with the checkoff. Because it's grower, it's farmer led, producer led. The producers, the farmers, whatever, they're making the decisions. They're the ones that are, making those investments to make that industry, whatever it is, to make that industry better.
And I think how you just sum that up there right at the end, I think it sounds like it's groups who want or feel like that there's not enough transparency. I know we have the OFF Act, which is in Congress as well right now, the Opportunities for Fairness in Farming Act. And it sounds like a lot of talk surrounding, some of the different organizations and their budgets, and folks who are questioning whether or not some of that checkoff money is going towards their general budget and this and that. And that's the sense that I get, is it's some groups who are just calling for, what they feel is more transparency. And so I feel like you have two sides to this issue here, Richard, and two groups who are very loud, both with their opinion on how this should move forward.
Yeah, very well said. And I probably should have said at the beginning, I've been involved in the soybean checkoff at the state level. I went on the state checkoff board in Missouri in 1991, served 12 years on that board, and then served 11 years on the United Soybean Board. And, when I went on to the Missouri board, that was the very beginning of the National Soybean Checkoff, and I can just tell you through my history, there is such an effort to reach out to producers, to let them know what's going on, actually to survey producers, to ask, are you familiar with the checkoff? Do you support the checkoff? Is the checkoff doing the things that you want it to do? It's your investment. Like, you are the investor in that checkoff. Are we hitting the mark, right? Like, I haven't been on the board since 2016, but that happens on an annual basis. Those numbers are dug into, and the directors that are on those boards respond to those survey numbers. And so I'm a huge supporter of checkoffs and the work that they've done, and the ROI that they return back to the investors that pay into those checkoffs.
Richard, I should ask you real quick before we wrap things up here for our interview this month. Farm Bill, any latest info you're hearing there? We're getting up against the clock here, and it seems more and more likely to me that a one-year extension of the Farm Bill might be in the cards here with how this is playing out right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably where we're headed. I do know the chairman on the House Ag Committee has really been working hard. So have the members on that House Ag Committee, as well as the Senate Ag Committee. They've been holding listening sessions. They're trying to do some initial drafts of some titles of the Farm Bill. As I think I told you before, when I was the administrator, we implemented the 2018 Farm Bill. And when that legislation is in book form, Jesse, it is almost 800 pages long. Yeah. It is a huge piece of legislation. And it just takes some time to get through all the titles and all the different components in those titles. But I do know that both committees are working really hard. They have the highest motivation to get this thing done. But I'm thinking that an extension is probably in the cards, which then gives them a little bit of breathing room to be able to really perfect some of the stuff that they're working on. I hear the things that are really important to folks. Certainly safety net programs, whether that be the ARC and PLC. I've heard about reference prices being, certainly being discussed. Certainly crop insurance. I mean, that is, that's got to stay in there, and it's got to stay in there with the support that it's had in the past. But I do know that they're working. I mean, it's not like they're not doing things to try to move this forward. They're working really hard to try to get some progress there.
Just plenty of obstacles in front of them, a lot to get done in a short amount of time, and that's something we'll just have to keep watching and see what they can get done there in Washington, D.C. Richard, always appreciate the time. Before we let you go, anything final you want to share with us here real quick?
I don't know. It's just great to have a chance to visit with you again, Jesse, and just wish everybody out there, safety and health, and we'll get through this summer. Hey.
We definitely will. We will do our best to get through this summer, and we appreciate the time. With that, Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director of Agriculture at Osborne Barr Paramore. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next month.
Thanks, Jesse.